Hey, today we're with the 87 Turbo Buick, and with those new dual fuel pumps I put in, we're going to need to get a little bit more regulation, so that 5/16 inch return line is a bit small and we're replacing it with 3/8 inch. And the simplest way to do that is to run a rubber line and this neat little banjo fitting right here. You put that on the bottom of the regulator, and then you attach the 3/8 inch fuel hose to it. Well, amongst other things we got to attach first, but yeah, and pretty much run that all the way to the return port in the fuel tank.
Yeah, so I'm with our boy Matt here. I'm Bruce, and what I did is I found a banjo bolt that has the same thread size right here, which is 14 millimeter by 1.5. Just in case you're wondering. This banjo fitting does not require an O-ring due to the fact that we have two crush washers on there. It'll do its job. In addition to that, you'll see later on in the video, we have a fitting that goes from a -6 to a barb fitting that we're going to run our 3/8 inch fuel line. We're going to run it right down this little hole right here, pretty much go over the bell housing, go along the frame rail on the driver's side all the way back to the tank. We'll keep it clear of suspension. We won't have to worry about exhaust on that side, so we won't have any heat, and we'll be right back with that to follow.
All right. Well, since the last part of our video, we have run the fuel line on the side of the body of the car underneath by the frame, and now we've brought the return line to the return port on the tank. And that's where we're at now. We're just finishing our hose clamps, and then we're going to leak check everything, make sure everything's good. And it's good to have lots of clamps to hold everything into place, because the last thing you want is any kind of a fuel leak. So having 4 strong hose clamps holding your main lines and your return lines is just cheap insurance to prevent things from leaking or coming out, which you don't want. All right, well,
that's right, because since we are upgrading a much bigger size for the return, is the reason why we're using more clamps than necessary. Where it may look crude, it is 100% necessary to ensure that we start the first clamp right after the nipple, so that there's no leaks internally in between these clamps, and then we put more just for security and insurance, like Matt was saying, because no one likes a fuel leak. And we're dealing mainly with volume here than pressure on the return, and the reason why, just like we were talking before, and as y'all know, Matt's got the double pumpers in here. You have to be able to let that extra volume return to the tank faster, because you're going to have more volume leaving, and by doing so, you are freeing the pump of any back pressure. If you have too much back pressure in the pump, then you'll have too much back pressure in the tank, and you won't be able to regulate fuel pressure, because the back pressure will exceed the set pressure of the regulator.
Yep. Well, the next part of it will be leak checking and adjusting the regulator, and then that will be it. Till more. All right, well, we finally connected the fuel line, put the clamps on, lifted the tank back up, took the car on a few drives, made some adjustments to the fuel pressure regulator, got it right around 45 pounds, which is good for idle. And we're having some issues. We suspect the ignition system, some of the ignition wires didn't ohm out right. They were too high on the ohms, correct?
Yep.
And that affects things. Little things on electronics make a big difference on these Buicks. I've learned that the hard way, and so is like everyone I talk to. Any little adjustment on the electronics on this, poor performing alternator, poor battery, a surge in power, a lack of energy at certain power settings affects these cars big time. So every little thing we can do. So we're in the future, I need a new ignition module because it's the wrong color. It's green. The factory AC Delco ones are supposed to be like a cream color, not green. So you got to be cream, not green. and no defects on that rubbery looking surface on the ignition modules, because they start getting defects, that means there's wires getting hot under there or something's heating it up and it's melting. So that's bad.
Right.
Melting's bad because these ignition modules are supposed to stay cool with all that rubber insulation. It's supposed to keep it cool. But we also found bad coils, so my coil pack was bad, it tested bad, and we suspect that's what heated up the ignition module and turned it green. And since these ignition modules are very hard to get for these Turbo Buicks, there is that, my friend's going to talk about the fix, the permanent fix for that. It's a more improved ignition module and coil system, which will solve the problem for the long term. But for the short term, I've found a ignition module at a shop for, you know, about $200 something. So we'll get that put in just to get me by. And then later on down the road, I'm going to get this component that Bruce is going to talk about.
Yeah, so real quick, just to recap back, if you look over here, here's how our barb fitting ended up with, I don't know if y'all can see it or not, but the barb fitting ended up fitting real nice and tight and clean. We had no leaks. It went down the chassis, it went down above the bell housing right there real good, and we were able to adjust fuel pressure after that with by relieving the back pressure on the fuel system. Yeah, and like Matt was saying here, we had this coil right here, number 5 and 2. It was reading too high of ohms. It was reading about 14,500 ohms, where these are supposed to read from post to post. If you pull these plug wires off, they're supposed to read between 11 to 13,000 ohms, and you check it while it's hot after the vehicle's been running. So we had 13,000 and some change here, 14,500 and 13,000 and some change here. One of the other things that you're looking for is to ensure that you have consistent resistance amongst each one. This coil pack Matt had laying around tested out at 13.21 exactly on each coil. So now we know we have consistent coils, consistent spark amongst cylinders. As you can see, this plug wire is a little bit smaller. It's because we were going through just some plug wires to find a set that matched within 10% of resistance. You can have about 500 to 1,000 ohms per foot with these, but you don't want them to be more than 10% away from each other for resistance. So I do believe in theory, along with this ignition coil being 32 years old, that the ignition module being 32 years old, that the bad coil was kind of heating up that part of the module. And what Matt was talking about with that cream colored stuff, it's an epoxy resin that acts as an insulator between the coil pack and the ignition module to prevent the ignition module from overheating. It's a very sensitive system. So Bob Bailey came out with what's called the TR6 ignition module. It's really nice. It's got a built-in two-step, built-in rev limiters, and it has a much better cam sync and crank sync to give your computer a better reference on where the engine is at all times to, you know, kind of get the precision down for optimum spark, ignition, timing. Everything is just moves a lot faster with newer technology. You basically got a motherboard and built a chipset for it, and it's an amazing product. It's expensive, but you got to pay to play, you know. For right now, we got another one that'll be coming in shortly from highwaystars.net. That is just a replacement AC Delco ignition module that is a known good module. The modules that you buy from any auto parts stores, you're just wasting your money. Don't do it. Go through highwaystars.net, get on the turbobuick.com boards in the parts section, ask some people if they have any laying around, call up some of the vendors. You'll be surprised what the vendors have laying around, and find you a good stock replacement, save you some time. But yeah, that's all I got. It's been nice out here seeing another Turbo Buick owner and wrenching a little bit. We got a really clean hit off this car one time after doing all these changes. It held all the way a little bit past 20 pounds boost, and it was pulling like a freight train. I was pretty much in the trunk. So
yeah, best run we had yet.
So we know that we're definitely getting closer. It was a combination of problems that was creating the situation and the outcome. So
yeah.
I think that we're just one or maybe two things away.
And I'm going to strongly urge anybody against E3 spark plugs in these Turbo Buicks because their gaps are way too big.
Oh yeah.
I took somebody's advice and ran them, and once we changed to a 28 thousandths gap on some AC Delco 42 TS's, and hey, I mean, that was a much better response. So every little thing we've done so far has made great adjustments to the car. I mean, we've simplified some vacuum. We got the fuel return system to work better by adding a 3/8-inch fuel hose instead of the stock 5/16, which was not getting the extra fuel back to the tank fast enough. So at idle, I was sitting at 52, 54 pounds of pressure when I should be at 45, 42, 45, roundabout. But yeah, at idle. So, and now the boost pressure and the fuel pressure move pretty much together. As the boost pressure climbs, so does the fuel pressure, and that's what you want to see when you have your fuel pressure and your boost gauges next to each other. You see boost pressure rise, your fuel pressure has to rise with it. That's very important. So, you know, that's just some little tools to add to the toolbox there. And
yeah, and how big was the gap on those E3s? Like 50 thousandths around?
50 thousandths plus.
Yeah, anything with the boosted vehicle, when the boost goes into the cylinder on the intake stroke, and then it goes to the combustion stroke, it's just going to blow out the plug. You won't have any spark after that, and it'll be popping. So we definitely got rid of a lot of that issue with it. So more to follow. These translators and these mass airflow sensors, you know, they do their job, and they do what they're advertised to, but and this day and age, with the size of turbochargers and boosts we like to run with race gas and some people with alcohol, you know, they're just not efficient enough for the computer to get the right you know, reference on how much boost you're actually running. These run off negative pressure, so any vacuum leaks and boost leaks are critical to the accuracy of the readings. So I suggest, you know, if you're having issues, and you know, save up the money to go with the speed density setup that uses the map sensor or a standalone computer management system. There's the ECU GN, there's the MS3 Pro, there's the Holley, and the Fast XFI. Some people run Pro EFI, although Pro EFI is not as quite plug and play as the other systems, but they all do pretty much the same thing. It's just you're going to spend more money for a certain brand for maybe some features that aren't necessary, but you know, it will definitely mitigate so many issues by just running a map sensor and a computer that can compute that.
All right, well, there's some great information, and we've learned a bunch of things on this car, and it's improved a lot, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and have a great day and mad boosting.